Good afternoon. Today is Friday, March 15th. It's a Friday, so that means it's time for some right-wing insanity report. I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News. Monday through Thursday, we talk about left-wing craziness and the Democratic Party, but on Fridays, we reserve Friday for right-wing insanity. So today, joining me on the show is Steve Monachelli, who has been on the show before. You know his work from Rolling Stone. We're going to go over a report actually that he's done with Bellingcat recently, Texas Observer, Daily Dot, host of other places. Welcome to the show, Steve. Glad to have you back on.
Thanks for having me.
So the first thing we want to talk about today, you had a recent report in Bellingcat about a Texas neo-Nazi guy who's part of the Fight Club down there, the Active Club. We're going to talk about that. But beforehand, I think we need to do some sort of an introduction into what these active clubs are, because not everybody knows. I think that, in my opinion, this is the fastest growing segment of that sort of national socialist culture that's out there in the country. Originally, we would have to go back and look at the Rise Above movement that was spawned out of here in California, Southern California. Robert Rundo and a handful of other guys started doing this. They are most known for traveling to Charlottesville and participating in the Unite the Right riot up in Berkeley for all of that stuff that went on at Berkeley. So, and a few other places, but it's sort of spawned a movement that's been growing across the country and also internationally. One thing that Robert Rundo did back in the early days was travel to various parts of Europe. He went to Ukraine and did some training there with Azov Battalion, actually. This is, I think, about 2014, 2015. And then recently, he was arrested for some of his actions. He had fled the country through Mexico, had gone to Romania. He was picked up there by the FBI because the Romanian government was fine with the extradition, brought him back here. He went to go to trial. The judge let him go, basically saying that it was kind of this wild thing that the judge wrote. It sounded something like Andy Ngo would write, but basically that he was, the victim of political persecution. So he was released for 24 hours, but the Ninth Court stayed the original, put an order to get him back into prison. So he's obviously somebody that could go out on bail again, drive down to Mexico and leave. So he's currently back in jail. That's some background. Are you with us, Steve? I think we have some internet issues here.
Yeah, I'm back. I think
okay.
my VPN may have been causing me to be a little slow. So
all right.
Shut that off, and I think I'll be in the clear.
Right on. Okay, so do you have thoughts on just some of that background with Rise Above movement and how the Active Club movement was spawned? I don't know if you have stuff you want to add to that.
No, I mean, from what I caught of your explanation, I think that gives a broad overview. I'm not sure if you mentioned the white nationalism, like 3.0 idea that Rundo.
Not yet. Let's talk about that. Okay, so 3.0 was like sort of the rebirth of this that sort of made it grow bigger. I want to pull up. This is an article that I actually wrote in Daily Dot over a year and a half ago. I want to pull this up because this was the first time they kind of did this like massive staging of a boxing match, and they did it with members of Patriot Front. So Patriot Front is Thomas Rousseau, neo-fascist guy. Obviously, they have, I believe, Nazi beliefs. Some people might say otherwise, white nationalism, whatever you want to call it. But they had a boxing match here in Southern California. So nationalism that will terrify Jewish power inside the neo-Nazi Fight Club, trying to unite the white supremacist movement. Patriot Front and RAM got together to punch each other. That's the best tagline ever. Thank you so much. Keep punching, boys. On August 21st, members of the two white supremacist group, Rise Above movement and Patriot Front, met for a mixed martial arts event in Southern California. It was, in the words of an account from the blog Hyphen Report. Hyphen Report is this white supremacy blog. A showcase of the strength of the fabric of nationalism in America that will terrify Jewish power for decades to come. Birth of a New Frontier is what they called it. As it was called, had attendees from across the country and as far away as Florida and Texas, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. In its report on the night, the author of the blog said that the event wasn't for the public. It was for a special few who were dedicated enough to the craft of fighting and to build a nationalist internal culture, that they have found their way to it. Steve, let me ask you this. 3.0 is something you brought up. That was sort of, they spawned this idea of growing the active clubs. They use the mixed martial arts, the fighting stuff, as a tool for recruitment. So it's not just this show of strength, right?
Right. It's a way to build community among people who may not be yet outright fascists, but are, disaffected or alienated for some reason and could be blackpilled in the process of, joining this sort of mixed martial arts culture. And it dovetails with their obsession with hypermasculinity and physical fitness, and all of that. There's been some recent average conservative jokes coming out of the active club culture, basically mocking, sort of the lack of fitness that you see at some rallies and events, like at the border at Eagle Pass. So yeah, I think it is definitely like one way to recruit, and then it also just gives them cover for their sort of, preparation for violence, as many researchers have pointed out. It's like a convenient excuse to, practice fighting and hurting people. And so it's not to say that all MMA is that, but when you place it in the context of what their ideology is and their rhetoric, I think it is fairly interpreted as more than just, a form of sport.
Right. Oftentimes they create these videos where they show themselves either quote unquote training, right? So me and the fellas are getting together and we're going camping and we're going to go practice our drills, this kind of stuff. Some of these videos are actually pretty comical, although these guys don't see it that way. I wanted to play a couple of clips from Patriot Front, some training videos that they had.
3, 2, up, down, 1, up.
Give it everything you got.
Up, down. Good work, boys.
Why are they in a circle? It reminds me of that movie about the centipede horror movie, the human whatever.
Human centipede. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that.
I don't.
Guys
I don't
being
understand.
dudes. Just guys being dudes, That's what that looks like to me.
Or let's play the next one. This is some example of their hand-to-hand combat training.
10-second mark.
Phil, keep those hands up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Everybody's got to start somewhere.
So the other thing that's very common in these groups is they like this idea of military training, and they also actively try to recruit military members, right? Because they want guys that have had some sort of quote unquote war training. It's part of why Robert Rundo did go to Ukraine and some of these other places, because he was looking for some sort of quote unquote real world experience. There's something that they find attractive about that. On the very fringe, if you're talking about the super accelerationist black pilled folks, they believe they're training for a race war. They do believe that, I think. But let's play this one last clip of Patriot Front.
Rear guard, stagger. Hey, don't let him in. You're staggering, guys. Cycle back. What are we doing? Cycle back, right. Hold on. You're right through the line. All right, should we try that again from the top? Yeah, walk right through the line. Mark time. Mark. Step. Hey. Step. Hey. Rear guard. All right, call it. Stagger right. Stagger right. Right. You guys in my town? Good. Yeah? Block him. Out. Cycle back. Help each other out. Let's come back here, man. Look, shoots. Call it again. Yeah, you bet. Don't let him pass. Cycle back. That's perfect. Hey. All right, that's good. That's good. Circle back. Nope, we're good. We're good.
I mean, I suppose if they were going to war in the 17th century, this might make sense. But I mean, come on, guys. Also, shout out to Unicorn Riot. These videos are all from their Patriot Front leaks that they have. If you want to go through and look at more of the stuff, you can go to the Unicorn Riot website. But what are your thoughts, Steve?
Well, there's that whole joke about how men will obsess about the Roman Empire instead of going to therapy. It's like basically this. That's what I think about like this when I see this in particular. But this is also the sort of stuff that I think informs the belief and argument that those Patriot Front fellas up in Idaho were planning on maybe rioting or doing some other stuff because, it's like in this video, they could say maybe they're just being purely defensive, but like in reality, it's like they're organizing as a unit in preparation for conflict.
Right. And it's also very old school conflict, like you're saying, Roman Empire. It's come on now. This is in this century. You're not going to fight that way, right? You guys would be mowed down in 2 seconds by the enemy. I
don't really know what they're doing. It
like,
feels like LARPing.
It's LARPing.
It's like cosplaying. Like these guys could have a better time at an anime convention, or like just actually joining a LARP team and showing up. So like Ren Fair,
costumes on, exactly.
Like, there are healthy outlets for that. It's possible.
It's bizarre. So 3.0, next level of that, they've been, forming smaller groups across the country. So you now have not just the main active clubs that were started by Rundo here in California, but they're everywhere in the country. So, and some of them are as small as like 4 to 5 members. So not necessarily large groups of guys, right? But they all have their different Telegram accounts. They all get together at these various events that they plan, and they meet each other and they go camping or whatever else. So I think you're right about how they're trying to sort of make it a sense of community where these folks feel safe in their, white nationalist beliefs, as well as doing these, sort of community oriented events, like the girlfriends come and cook dinner and whatnot. So,
yeah. And in Texas, there's plenty of evidence to show that active clubs are overlapping and in some instances, like collaborating on flyer drops or propaganda distribution with other white nationalist groups or neo-Nazi groups like the Goyim Defense League or the White Lives Matter umbrella, which is just a front for basically neo-Nazis of one flavor or another. And just like in Patriot Front as well, explicitly. So, it's, I guess these are individual cells, maybe some small, but it is a way for them to begin to interact with a larger white nationalist movement.
Right. And the goal is to make it palatable for the sort of quote unquote normies to not be offended by it, and then eventually red pill them further into these belief systems. I did reach out when I wrote this original article. I did reach out to Grady for comment, who is one of the original members, friends with Robert down there in San Diego, and he basically touted this 3.0 idea, where he's like, Black folks can go have another country all by themselves. We want a white country. That doesn't make us racist. We're not saying that we're, better than they are. They're just, we don't believe in mixing culture. So this is the kind of rhetoric that they use.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So I want to turn to your really interesting expose in Bellingcat. This is the Texas. We're down in Texas now. Active club leader blurred his face, but of course he forgot to scrub his socials. That's how you're able to track him down. Let's put that up. We'll read a little bit of it, and then you can walk us through the finer points of your investigation here. So the Texas Observer, who is another organization you regularly write for down there in Texas, and Bellingcat have identified the leader of a white nationalist group that distributed anti-Semitic and racist flyers in Weatherford, Mineral Wells, and Eagle Pass 3 small Texas cities over the last year. In an online conversation with The Observer, Rhett Murray Loftus, a 23-year-old resident of Weatherford, admits that he leads the Parker County Active Club. I'm a fascist. There's no denying that. So he's admitting to the fact he's a fascist. Loftus, a former musician, said he first got active in the white nationalist movement in 2021 after spending several years lurking in online forums. I thought that was kind of interesting, Steve, because this kind of sheds light on the fact that 4chan, all of these other forums where people get sort of, introduced to these ideas and desensitized a little bit to violence are effective in recruiting people and bringing them further to the right. So walk us through a little bit about how you found this guy.
So, as we sort of detail in the article, it really started with their Twitter account. So this Twitter account that they were actively posting Active Club propaganda on, it had a photo, and that photo was anonymized, but it showed some large prominent tattoos. The other thing about the Twitter account is that it had a really unique handle, AtlasCon69. And so that was like the initial clue for figuring out who this person might be. So it really didn't take many permutations of searches of AtlasCon to start pulling up some interesting things that emerged as leads to more information. So Spotify was one of these places where Rhett Murray Loftus has several bands that he had made music with in the past that he's credited as being the creator of, including one called AtlasCon. And one of the things that helped us find more information was that there's a photo of him on this Spotify page. It's a little edited, and so it wasn't a super clear photo, and it didn't have all the tattoos visible, but it was a start. The Spotify page also mentioned this other thing called the Atlas Collective, which we learned was an umbrella brand for his musical projects. That turned up some other things, like a YouTube channel that featured AtlasCon music and some other bands that Loftus is credited as a member. So, that led us to some other things. Like one of the photos on one of the songs has the 5 members of a band called Muay Thai. And in the middle is a person who looks a lot like the photo that was with AtlasCon on Spotify, which when you look really closely at this photo of these 5 guys, you can see a little tattoo peeking up through the chest, like the zipper on his chest, and he's the one right in the middle. We were able to then find an interview about one of these bands on Spotify on a podcast that one of his former bandmates had made, where he is named as well. And then we started I started scouring the Parker County Active Club Telegram, which was filled with a bunch of different photos that showed his tattoos from different angles. Another thing that was really crucial was one video where they failed to completely anonymize his face and his tattoos. And then really pulling it all together was this website called Redbubble, where people sell merchandise. And they had an account. Atlas Collective had an account. And among the things that they sold on this page, like band merch, it was also shirts affiliated with the Parker County Active Club. And with another group that this guy has started called the Texas Nationalist Network, which is effectively just like another brand for his white nationalist activity, his fascist activities. So it was, a really clean identification. A lot of things pointing back to the same person. There were some other checks that we had done in terms of just figuring out where he had, lived, kind of confirming some of the backstory of where about he was, as well as where he had worked or most recently is working. And, the cherry on top, though, was that I had gotten an email from Jason Lee Van Dyke. you probably know that name.
What?
If you missed that part of the story,
Wait, we got to go back and talk about who this guy is for a second, so people know. I apparently did miss this part of the story.
Yeah. For those who are unaware, Jason Lee Van Dyke is like a longtime like right-wing fascist guy. He had tried to join a group called The Base unsuccessfully, which is just a very bad group. He was a member of the Proud Boys and has been affiliated with them in the past.
Did legal work for them.
Currently is doing legal work for Patriot Front.
Right.
Myself and others had figured out that there's very likely, almost if not certain, that he was a member of the Patriot Front, Rocket Chat, and a number of other things. So
yeah, he was in the Rocket Chat leaks, also on Unicorn, right? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so he is like long time legal support for some of these groups, and so after I had contacted Rhett already and had this like very lengthy conversation with him via DMs on Twitter, then I got an email from Jason Lee Van Dyke, and he basically said that he had received a phone call from Mr. Loftus, and he was writing to ask me to leave Mr. Loftus alone. Inadvertently, he confirmed that I had reached out to his employer.
Like, Jason, thank you so much for that extra confirmation.
Yeah, because like I had reached out to who I had believed maybe his employer based on something that was said in the podcast from like 2 years ago. But then like, Mr. Van Dyke confirmed it for me. So that was like really the funny last thing, was that he had contacted me like further triply confirming this guy's identity after the guy had already told me. So, that was pretty much the process in a nutshell without getting into all of the painstaking details.
Wild. So that's kind of a crazy connection. What kinds of things has the Parker County Active Club been involved with locally? You mentioned that they were part of some flyer drops. Was that associated with Goyim Defense League? They've been out there flyering quite a bit.
Goyim Defense League and White Lives Matter activists have collaborated with them on those flyer drops. They've gone down to the state capitol in Austin and had like a little demonstration. They've teamed up with another active club closer down to San Antonio called the Alamo Active Club for like a vigil and like propaganda and stuff. They've had, fight meetups, and I am certain that they participated in something that I just posted about this morning, which was a fight event, very much like the one that you described in the article that you led off with.
Let's go ahead and pull that up. Actually, we have photos from that and some screenshots, so you can talk us through this as we show those. It's the Will to Rise 3 American Muscle, coming soon from Media to Rise. So just so folks know, that's Media to Rise. That's Robert Rundo Grady's group based out of San Diego. But they're sort of the media arm for the active fight club scene, so to speak. Hey, Colin, can you pull up that tweet from Steve? There it is. Thank you, Colin. All right, so let's pull up these. All right, go. We have our visual aids.
So basically in some Telegram chats, there were posts talking about how there had been a fight event that they called American Muscle. And they didn't say where it took place, but they shared a number of photos. And it didn't take long at all for some sleuths to figure out exactly where those photos had been taken. So if I think you can maybe go to some other photos here that are included, some other screenshots here. Yeah. So that was one of the photos they included in their Telegram posts. And, someone who is a really keen eye noted that that wooden table right there in the front has these letters, which is MVFD. And that kind of indicated that it could be like a fire department. FD is, usually the last thing. So it's not the location is not a fire department building, but that was the clue that led people to figure out that this was Munster Volunteer Fire Department. And Munster is a city in Texas, a small city. And so MVFD kind of narrowed it down. They figured out Munster. Then they were able to compare that photo to photos of this place in Munster, which is called the like Heritage Center.
Okay.
And that is more or less what allowed them to match up this photo with a location in Texas. I believe also some of the posts may have indicated that it was in North Texas, so they had already kind of narrowed down the search area for them. And this was passed on to me as a tip. I can't claim to have been, the entire team or, person who did this, but I was able to verify it through my own, research that indeed this tip was completely correct.
Right. Wild stuff. Oh, what was do we have any numbers on the attendance on this? I didn't see.
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, at least a few dozen,
Right.
but they did post photos like of them fighting and stuff, but they share those as a form of propaganda, and they like want people to see them. So frankly, I don't want to do their job for them.
Yeah, exactly. So do you feel like this movement is growing, or is it sort of at the same level it was 2 years ago? What are your thoughts on that?
It does appear to be growing, and I think there's some institutes that have done research studies like ISD and others, which do seem to suggest that there's a growth. It's hard to pin down an exact number in terms of like the amount of people right now or the growth over time, but there are dozens of these groups across not just the United States, but even including Europe as well, and maybe some other places that I'm not.
Oh yeah, France has them now, and they've spread out everywhere. And I do think that they're useful for recruitment to pull people into the further right. So as far as locations in Texas, there's Alamo, there's Parker County. Are there other active club cells, or are those the main two?
I believe there's about to be a third one. I'm not sure, but they've been posting about it. I don't know if it's actually active or not, but there are efforts to create one in the Houston area.
So Eagle Pass, you mentioned they were down in the Eagle Pass area. That's where a lot of the folks are congregating at the border. I know we had the Texas border convoy group there. There's a group that came from California, San Ysidro, that drove down there. Have they been sort of maybe in that group as well, trying to recruit, do you think?
They were definitely passing out flyers. Every time they pass out flyers and propaganda, that's a form of them trying to recruit people and spread their rhetoric and their agenda. So they definitely were trying. They definitely posted photos of them passing out flyers in Eagle Pass. But they also simultaneously mocked people who were there for not being physically fit. So, they tend to go, I'm not saying they're entirely consistent here, but they're probably tending to go to people who they thought might be targets of their propaganda. So, younger white men, basically, and maybe women as well.
So you talked a little bit about the Tennessee Active Club in your piece, and I think that it's worth mentioning the Tennessee Active Club because they've been far more active, I think, than any other group outside of California, involved with even, the Lewis County episode where you had them doing security, quote unquote, for elected officials and whatnot. What is the crossover with the Tennessee Active Club and the Texas one?
So, I can't say that I know in intimate detail what the crossover is there, but I can definitely tell you that these groups all cross promote each other and share, posts from other areas, telegrams. And so in that sense, they are independent cells, but they are engaging in activity as a part of this intentional network. So that's the extent that I can speak with confidence that there is overlap, but, we very, are likely to find out that this gathering in North Texas featured members from Tennessee potentially, or California. Because I think those sorts of events, that's what the purpose they serve is to gather from across the country, members of different active
clubs. A network, so to speak.
Exactly.
What do you have any other thoughts on the active clubs before we switch gear and talk about South by Southwest? Because this is an interesting article too.
Not a ton of other thoughts. It's just the latest iteration of like a phenomenon that's more or less been happening for a while, but it's like a particular form of it and a particular
Yeah.
style of organizing. So, there used to be Nazi skinheads that organized to do violence in like sort of gang-like, cell-like structures.
Right.
That went away after a while, or didn't really go away, but it was kind of like marginalized and targeted. And then now this is just the latest version of it. So, it's nothing to like be alarmed about as if like this is some particularly new innovation, but it is certainly something to be concerned about in the sense that it's spreading and
It is spreading. Yeah.
normalization.
It is being normalized. Let me ask you before we get on to South by Southwest, let me ask you this, because something I've noticed about the active clubs recently is a religious aspect. They have the appeal to heaven flags a lot in their photos and videos now, which is sort of something that the Christian Nationalists has taken up as their go-to flag. And for example, the guy that runs the Central California Active Club here is hyper Catholic. I would say he's a traditional Catholic. He's very anti-Semitic, obviously, but comes from this super far right brand of Catholicism, the trad Catholics, right, that want to bring back Latin Mass, that think that Jews are responsible for killing Christ, and that they're terrible people for that. All kinds of things in that nature. Is this something that you've noticed also as well? Do you think that's part of the conversation with the Texas group?
I definitely think that there's overlap with those sort of like religious extremist movements. But in terms of like active clubs and their specific sort of an ideology and purpose, I don't see that necessarily being a necessary element of it,
Right.
or like embedded into their structure. But it doesn't surprise me at all that that's something that is a part of it in terms of specific members or groups having this tendency.
Right.
Because the hardest edge of those religious extremist movements is sort of like a call to a crusade of sorts,
Right.
which overlap.
That explains the shields and the swords fighting.
Yeah, sure, exactly. They're calling back to a longer sort of historical tradition of Christian identity.
100%. It's like a romanticized version of white Christian history, like that never actually existed, but in their minds it does. And it's wild to me, Steve, because on the other side of the spectrum, you have the neo-Nazi groups that are very pagan, right? They're the opposite. They're either Odinists, where they worship some sort of, Asgardian, for lack of a better word, sorts of pagan stuff, or satanic, like Order of the Nine Angles. So I don't know. I just think they would all get together. They could all get together on their ideas of white supremacy if they left all this stuff aside. But oftentimes you see them arguing now over whether to be Christian or not, which is, I'm like, hey, fine, let them fight. It keeps them less unified. But it's kind of strange how they've all kind of adopted these various extremist versions of religion.
Yeah. It fascism is unfortunately somewhat of a big tent when it comes to that stuff. And in my piece, if you read it closely, you'll note that while Mr. Loftus says that he's not a National Socialist, that he also admires Hitler. And he clearly collaborates.
Hang on. Why does he think he's not they all do that, right? I'm not actually a Nazi. I'm not actually but HH, whatever. You are a Nazi if that's the kind of thing you admire and say. I don't understand. What do they think it softens it if they say that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and also I think to some extent it might also be true. They might be some other sort of niche fascist that I don't know about, or they might identify with some other specific historical tradition that isn't specifically Nazism, but at the end of the day, they're sort of all drinking from the same well.
Right, exactly. It seems like a fine line to me. All right. I want to move on now to the specter of disinformation haunts South by Southwest. So South by Southwest is, what is it, a decade old now? But it started as the sort of musical festival in Austin, Texas. Then they started doing film screenings, music with the musical acts, and other forms of art and whatnot. So it's become like a big deal. And I think don't they have festivals in other areas now, not just Austin?
They might have some satellite events. Yeah, but
Yeah.
like the big thing is always in Austin.
All right, so let's put up your piece from Texas Observer, and then we'll go through this a little bit. So artificial intelligence is obviously on everybody's brains at this point. It's becoming a big thing in journalism and other areas. Artificial intelligence often gets things wrong, but it's cheap for the corporations to use. So, they're all kind of gangbusters about being able to do that. So I think that's going to be an issue going forward. So when some of the largest newswire agencies in the world had to retract a manipulated photograph of British royal Kate Middleton on March 11th, one thing was made clear. Even well-resourced journalistic outlets are ill-equipped to detect technology advanced fakery. Counterfeit photos created to deceive audiences have existed nearly as long as photography itself. Joseph Stalin famously edited political opponents out of the historical record. The use of deceptive photo editing by a PR flack for a British aristocrat may seem inconsequential relative to disinformation deployed to influence elections or international conflicts. Nevertheless, the emergence of generative artificial intelligence technologies that can automate the creation of bogus but convincing content pours gas on an already raging fire, posing a serious threat to democratic societies. This is so true. I feel like we already live in post-truth America, and I don't think AI is going to help with that at all. So great thesis there. But walk us through how this all relates with South by Southwest.
Well, so South by Southwest, used to be a music festival, and then it has since evolved into this part tech media expo, part film and music, convention and conference. And in recent years, after COVID sort of disrupted their business for a bit and created some cash flow problems for them, they have since embraced some new sponsorships from places like the U.S. Army and military contractors. So one of the things that has really been a hot topic at South by Southwest for several years going now is like artificial intelligence and generative, content technology and all the sort of things that we're talking about with ChatGPT or any of the prompts like Mid-Journey that can create images, and how that now dovetails with this other problem that we've been dealing with in a variety of forms for several years, which is just like the proliferation of disinformation and misinformation on social media platforms. So several panels this year were on the subject of disinformation and elections, disinformation and journalism, and how that all relates to the rise of artificial intelligence or, large language models or advanced machine learning technologies, like however you want to describe it. And whether we should be seriously concerned about bad actors being able to do disinformation at scale in this new way that could really cause a lot of chaos. And really interesting conversations. I think the most ironic one was that I saw some people speak at like a DoD sponsored event that was in like what they called the DoD house, where there were some military drones at the front and there were people playing video games in the back.
It's so wild to me that is so proliferated through South by Southwest. I mean, it was sort of when it started the opposite of that, right?
Sure. And so like, the U.S. military is like one of the, as I said in the article, history's goats of propaganda campaigns. And now they're here like hosting these events, being like, we should be concerned about these new technologies, and like here are some technologists to tell you about all the things that can, that we're researching and doing to try and combat it. And simultaneously, many artists and panelists dropped out of the conference,
due to protest.
The presence of the U.S. Army and the sponsorship and military contractors, citing the missiles that are created and manufactured in the United States that are being dropped on civilians in Gaza as the reason that they dropped out. So we had a lot of this like cognitive dissonance going on and like baked into the whole scene, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't some interesting conversations that were going on there.
Do tell.
Well, basically, the upshot was that the prognosis is grim. It's not great. There are a lot of reasons to be concerned. There are things that are being done right now to sort of try and get ahead of it. But one statistic that was cited, I don't even think I wrote about this in my article, was that the United States federal government only has like $75 million set aside to protect our election infrastructure. And I think it costs more than that to do one gubernatorial election in Los Angeles alone. So there's this profound lack of resources, and some really frank commentary from people like the Colorado Secretary of State. Her name is, I believe, let me just get it right so I don't screw up her name and make myself look silly. So yeah, Jenna Griswold, she basically said we shouldn't expect Congress to do anything about it. It's totally dysfunctional right now. And also there are plenty of people in office who may even like the disinformation, like all the people who are election deniers. So that's one problem. Joan Donovan, who is a great researcher in this area, and some of you may have heard of her due to her being sort of unceremoniously fired from Harvard, and her blowing the whistle on how it related to being maybe too critical of Facebook and Meta, who are major donors to Harvard. And she basically said, corporate interests are not really in the direction of regulating this right now. They want to operate in an unregulated environment. They haven't committed themselves to protecting, local information that is timely and accurate. And, a lot of these tools that we're talking about can only even exist because of years of social media platform use and the generation of all of the sort of content that's now being scraped to then feed these machines and, create this monster. So it wasn't something that, was really optimistic, unfortunately. And most of the use cases for this stuff when it comes to elections are bad and not good. Good. One of those, being hypothetically, what if someone clones Jenna Griswold's voice and then makes a bunch of phone calls to different election officials? Exactly. And they're not trained to anticipate that, or there's no mechanism for confirming that the information is real or accurate. And then it could just be chaos. There's Lindsay Gorman, the senior fellow for emerging technologies at the Alliance for Securing Democracy, was there's more negative use cases than positive ones, but some of the positive ones are potentially things moving towards a world where unless a photo has been authenticated through some certain protocol, Sony has this new camera where a publisher can be given a link and then request the metadata for a photo to confirm when it was taken and that it hasn't been fucked with. That's a thing. Or having some, process for embedding some sort of unique information that can then be verified by a user when it comes to things like election information. But there's a lot of obstacles, technical obstacles and funding and policy obstacles in between where we are now and where we could be when it comes to that stuff. And the best bang for our buck is probably going to be at the state level, where people like Griswold have more influence, as opposed to at the federal level, where they haven't even been able to pass a bill about phone call spam, which has been plaguing us.
Exactly. Actually, I want
forever at this point.
Steve, I want to read this quote from Griswold because I think it perfectly encapsulates what you're saying right now. So she says, you quote her in the article, Congress at this point, under the current speaker, is basically non-functional. Everybody says, oh, Congress can pass a law, and they can, but they won't. Let's not waste much effort. Many elected officials want the disinformation. This is true, right? Many elected officials want the disinformation. They thrive in post-truth America. Back to the quote, they are literally hundreds of election deniers in Congress. Do you think they're going to allow a federal agency to counter disinformation? No, and then Joan Donovan said the biggest lobby on Capitol Hill is tech. So this is a twofold thing, right? You have a Secretary of State basically saying Congress isn't going to pass a law because the makeup of Congress currently is you have a lot of still a lot of Trump people, so to speak, that are denying that Trump lost the election. They're 100% election deniers. They have been telling their voters that Trump won the election. And a lot of people still believe this, even though that's verifiably false information. And, tech is like not going to help because they don't want to be regulated. It's like a perfect storm.
Right. And, like, meanwhile, deep fakes are being used to like target high schoolers with like unconsensual deep fake porn. And that's just disgusting.
Scam is a real problem. Yeah.
That, people are getting financially scammed by these sorts of things. There are already laws on the books that are being broken with the help of these sorts of tools. And yet it's like so hard to get justice, even in those
impossible. Anecdotally, let me tell you a story. I've never told this story before publicly, but I'll tell you now because it sort of fits into this. Somebody hacked my Facebook account. I rarely, if ever, use Facebook, but I have one. And because I don't ever use it, it's easy probably to hack, or people think, oh, she's not using it. Anyway, somebody hacked my account and they used it to spread CSAM, like all over the place. And I got this message. I log in and I see it and I'm like horrified, like what the hell's happening here? Do you know how long it took me to get somebody on Facebook to respond to me over this?
Like way too long. Whatever it is.
And months
way too long.
And months, almost a year. And when they finally did, I'm like, wow, really? Like CSAM isn't enough to like wake your asses up. I like emailed you 7 or 8 times like a year ago. And now you're coming after, and you know why they were coming after me? Wait, here's the best part. Whoever had hacked my account had not only done that, but they had run up $1,000 in ads.
Wow.
and they wanted to get paid. I was like, wait, you kidding me?
And then meanwhile, like, there's similar issues are flourishing on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But I can tell you that for the second time today, I have just been locked out of my account because I shared the name of the racist and anti-Semitic cartoonist Stone Toss.
You know what? Let's talk about
this. It's now public information.
It's public information.
It's elsewhere. I haven't shared like any private information about this guy other than just like, this is who this person is. And I was locked out once. I appealed it on the basis that the information is now public.
Well, we can say his name here.
Back, and I'm now looking at a screen that says I am locked out. And so I literally had to appeal it. If you saw me looking down, it was because I was actively appealing that on my phone right now. So it's very silly. Very silly.
Is it pronounced Grainbenner? So Hans Christian
Grabener, I don't know. Maybe I'm not.
Graebener. Okay, let's talk about this for a second, so people know what we're talking about. They're probably very confused right now. Stone Toss was a neo-Nazi cartoon, and an anonymous account was able to identify who he is, and so they did a very long tweet thread showing how they identified who he is, what his name was, and all this kind of stuff. And in retaliation, Elon Musk, who is like, yay, free speech, I don't censor anybody. That was his whole platform, right? Is now like shutting down anybody that mentions this guy's name. The original account that posted the thread on identify him was terminated, suspended permanently. So this to me is just one more example of Elon Musk defending white nationalists, right? He says, and suspending, left counts that he doesn't like. He says he's a champion for free speech and that he's against censorship, but he has a whole entire track record now of showing us that he's willing to politically silence those he disagrees with. So this is just nonsense. This is one more example.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to delete the tweet. It's not an example of private information being shared.
It's not.
And frankly,
it's him trying to censor something because he probably.
And if this is the same thing, like you might as well ban me for having reported on the identity of the active club leader, because if that is considered doxing, just unmasking somebody like that, then basically there's a whole category of journalism that is not going to be allowed on
That's
that
right.
space.
That's right. I mean, so he's not a First Amendment warrior whatsoever. It's kind of scary that this is where we're at with our social media platforms, but here we are. Everybody start using BlueSky. Let me just say that. I'm on BlueSky now. I've been on there for a while, but I think now that they've opened it up, the platform up, and I hopefully will have video soon and DMs, and we can all say goodbye to Twitter. Because I logged into Twitter the other day to retweet my Unicorn Riot article, and I go into my notifications, and I have notifications from people I don't follow. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, Elon's trying to force me to read stuff I don't want to force, like not only on my home feed, but now also in my notices. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, no kidding.
Frightening. All right, people, make sure you like and share the live stream if you haven't already. We'll be taking super chats at the end of the show. If you've got questions for Steve, he is an absolute expert in this area. We've had him on the show before. He's always great. So if you have questions, let us know. Do you have any other parting thoughts on artificial intelligence and where that's headed? I do think potentially there's a real extremist angle here, because depending on how you feed your algorithm, right, your AI, it could return, like I know there's been some reporting on folks using Chat GPT to find like Nazi stuff eventually coming, if you ask the right questions, coming back from the AI.
Right.
Like how prevalent is that, and do you have concerns over that?
I mean, it's like garbage in, garbage out. And
Right.
so I think that's a big reason why, you see that a lot with those sorts of AI. I mean, where it is right now is if you're on Twitter, you'll just know that bots are constantly spamming your replies with like porn advertisements, basically. And the last thing I just published was about how in Texas, there's some politicians who are celebrating the fact that Pornhub is no longer accessible to people in the state without a VPN, because they passed a law last year, and the Attorney General has been trying to enforce the law with a lawsuit that Pornhub and other, large peddlers of porn must have a mandatory age verification requirement to prevent children from getting on the website, which this is actually settled law. There were other example cases in the past where they basically said you can't do that because it would actually interfere with adults communicating and sharing information in this like overreaching attempt to protect children, which ultimately is the responsibility of the parents of the children. And in this instance, when they're celebrating about this on Twitter, like their comments are getting flooded with like, bleep me if I can't say this, but pussy in bio or nudes in bio or like whatever, link in bio advertising some smut. And that's in direct response to them being like, we're protecting the kids from access to porn. And none of them have said a word about this problem on Twitter. In fact, the Attorney General used to be mad at Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. And then after he bought it, he started going after its critics.
Right.
So,
because they don't want it. They don't care about censorship. They don't care about First Amendment rights. They're not really free speech warriors. They want to control speech is what they want.
They don't even necessarily want to protect kids from this stuff.
No, they don't. I agree with you.
Because if they were morally consistent, they would be going after X/Twitter, but they won't because they've gotten all cozy with Mr. Musk.
That's right.
And they don't want him to get mad at them. So, just a very silly, dumb situation. But like on the other hand, like maybe AI is really not that advanced yet if like the most prolific use case of it is like this sort of spam, this like dumb spam. So I don't want to be a fear monger about all that stuff, but it's just a general exhortation to like be skeptical and like check shit if it seems outrageous, and like do not like fall for video or voice stuff or images on the first,
or even quotes. I mean, I think we've entered a world now where you have these AI generated, journalistic pieces where we've had false quotes in them.
Right. It's like this stuff is not actually good at analyzing anything or gathering information. It can just make stuff up in its place, and that's a common problem. So it might suck to find things on the internet these days because of how enshittified everything is. But
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, the shitification of the internet, which I didn't come up with that term.
Who came
shout
up
out
with
to
that? It's good.
Cory Doctorow.
Okay.
Good stuff. Go look him up. And just
Right
if you
on.
look up shitification, his name will pop up. But that's where we are. And like, you just have to get better at using the internet. That's really all I can tell you, because the cavalry is not.
The cavalry's not coming. And have you noticed lately, Steve, that also just using, I use Mozilla and I use DuckDuckGo. Even on DuckDuckGo, I can't find what I'm looking for half the time unless I use quotes around words, because I don't know what's going on even with them. I don't know if it's AI or what, but the search engines are just really broken at this point.
An arms race, like between people who are trying to flood the zone with shit for profit or for politics or whatever, maybe both. And then there's like people who just want to find information, and every time they improve, the tooling for how you can get information through search, there's like a whole industry of people ready to start coming up with new techniques to promote garbage and to displace real information. So yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. And
frustrating.
If I were, king for a day, it's like one of the directives would be like, we're making the search engine optimization industry more or less illegal, and that's just got to stop right now. And like, we got to also break up the monopoly search engines and actually create some competition around this, so that there is maybe some incentive for improvement instead of just like the big ones kind of,
and Google, they do it on YouTube, even internally. You'll see this. They preface certain accounts over others. I can type in the exact name of a video I'm looking for inside the YouTube search engine inside the app, and it won't come up. I will get videos from 2 years ago from some local news outlet that's nothing to do with what I'm looking for. I have to leave, go into DuckDuckGo, type in the video name, and get it that way. I mean, it's just so they're all sort of doing this sort of thing, and it's making it very difficult to get the information you want. And the worst part is oftentimes they're using this idea, well, we're concerned about disinformation, which is why we're doing it. But the metrics that they're using to decide what is and isn't disinformation are a little bit skewed, because they're saying if it's, CBS local news, okay, they're not spreading disinformation, when they could be, in a way. I mean, they might not have had an accurate investigation or something, or assuming a smaller independent outlet isn't exactly has a commitment to veracity in the same way, which could be totally false. It could be the opposite. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So the metrics that they're applying aren't great, in my opinion. For whatever reason.
It's a challenge. As journalism sort of falls apart and institutions are harder and harder to trust, especially, that's why I started with that case study of the Kate Middleton thing. Some of the most well-resourced ones were duped by just a single photo. And in many ways, that was because perhaps they over-indexed on trust when it came to the source of the information.
That's right.
And so it is like a mirror in their face of how audiences could feel whenever they read a story and then it ends up being not true in the way that they thought it was. So it's a serious challenge, and unfortunately it seems like we're not very well prepared for it, and so it's going to be a really bumpy ride. And the last thing I'll mention is one of the main sources of information about Facebook, CrowdTangle, is going to shut down with 10 weeks right before
I got an email from them this morning.
The election. They're going to have 10 weeks right before the election where there's no good way for researchers to monitor what's going on Facebook, which is just enough time for a bunch of dumb shit to happen. And similarly with Twitter now, people don't have access to it in the same way. So I don't know. It's almost it sucks, but it's almost you can't rely on these places.
No, you can't, and I still feel strongly. You mentioned the dark money earlier about how it costs, $75 million to run a mayor race in LA, probably more actually. And that's the entire budget that the DOJ has to fight disinformation. So the flooding of all this dark money into not only political campaigns, political corruption, but into buying up media. I mean, a lot of the problems I think that we have within the media world right now is because of venture capitalists flooding money into it and wanting to control the narrative. They're not doing it because they want to make money off of it. Journalism was never, ever a money-making thing, right? It's never going to be. It's a public good, right? It's a commitment to serve the public in a way by providing information that is supposed to be truthful, right? Veracity. So I feel like that dark money is definitely an element that's at play here, not only with the AI, not only with the post-Truth America chaos that has to do with elections, but also in the media world. And I think that the very wealthy echelon of donors that are behind this dark money are benefiting from all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think so. There's a lot of money in this stuff. And so there's a whole industry of people who would prefer it to continue. So yeah, it's not a good situation to be in.
It's not a good situation.
If you're living in like a democracy, it's not a great time.
All right. Are you ready to get your laugh on?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So time for some right-wing insanity roundup. This is where I always grab some videos that are kind of like either like shocking or very funny, or sometimes a combination of both. So the first one is I always try to pick a Christian nationalist one because they're becoming much more, I don't know, loud about their beliefs and how they want their beliefs to control the government and how their beliefs are the truth, etc. So I thought this was kind of wild because faith, not works, is what makes God happy, apparently now. Imagine that. Not your works. You can be a serial killer, kill 100,000 people, but if you have faith, you're good. How does this make sense? Let's play this.
I need God by my side each and every day to accomplish what he has called me to. And, I was reading in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 12, it starts out by saying, fight the good fight of faith. I think that's very telling to start out with fight. God has called us to live by faith. The just shall live by faith. And we know that nothing pleases God except faith. It's not our works that please him. It's our faith. And if you're going to live by faith, there's going to be a battle ahead. So you better be ready to fight.
I'm speechless by this. Maybe I shouldn't be. I suppose that's always been a section of the Christian far right that believe that faith is all that matters. But I mean, man, really? The 10 Commandments, we're going to throw those out the window now?
Yeah, there's just like so many quotes from the scriptures that directly negate that particular worldview that she espoused. It's almost
just
like
doesn't make
they didn't
sense.
read it. They didn't
Right?
read it.
They didn't read it, exactly. Well, it doesn't even make sense. Like, I mean, you're basically giving, like, you're opening the door to this idea that serial killers are perfectly fine if they have faith. I mean, if they love God and they have faith, but they kill 40 people, that's better than a guy that lives like a really good life and is kind and whatever else, but might be an atheist. How does that make sense? It's just nonsense. But she's not done. She's got thoughts on Social Security, Steve. Thoughts on Social Security. Let's play this one.
Lovely.
And now he's saying Republicans want to cut it. None of us have said that. I certainly have not said that. And, when it comes to Medicaid, there's certainly talk of work requirements for Medicaid. Mm-hmm. I'm for that all the way. There's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse that is tied to that. But, in some Democrats that I talk to, they want to take Social Security even further and give that to stay-at-home moms, people who are not paying into the system. And they say, this is a job and they deserve Social Security. And it's like, well, wait a second. That's already something that's pretty much going bankrupt. We have to, be very cautious with this. And they just want even more.
Okay, Lauren Boebert is just a special example of the far right in Congress. So, here she is saying that stay-at-home moms should not get Social Security. So a woman that's been married and didn't work and chose to raise her family, which is what people like her ideally say women should do, right? That's what they want. They, have respect for the family unit and respect women that want to have traditional roles, right? So if she does that when she gets to be 70 years old, she shouldn't be entitled to have some sort of Social Security payment. Like, what is she supposed to do? Live in the street if her she ends up on her own by some means? What is she saying here?
I'm confused on whether trad wives are supposed to be good or not good. I keep getting whiplash on this.
I know, right?
Question.
Which is it?
It's like, is it only the ones that are so wealthy that they can afford to make their own Cocoa Puffs at home, but have a maid clean their house? It's like that's the good kind, but like the kind that actually is like staying at home and working and might need some sort of government assistance to sustain that.
Yeah.
That's bad.
That's bad.
That's not okay.
It just doesn't make sense. And, the other thing is they are constantly having this argument that Social Security is going bankrupt. It's not. I wish they would stop saying that as well. It's an insurance system. You pay into it, you collect. It's not going bankrupt. And if they don't pay into it, they should still be able to collect. Maybe we just need to broaden our Social Security nets. I don't think old people should be out on the streets, for Pete's sake. What kind of civil society do you want to live in, Lauren? That's not very Christian of you, but you have faith, right? You have faith. It's fine.
Yeah, it's good. It reminds me of this is a niche reference, but there's a scene in this great film called The Petite Charm of the Bourgeoisie, and there's like a Catholic priest who is giving this man his last rites, this like poor farmer, and like it turns out in his last confession, this person tells the priest that he killed their parents, and then so the priest is like on his way out, and then he grabs the shotgun and shoots the guy. So like even in that instance, the priest was like, no, faith is not good enough for
this is not okay. Exactly.
Your works do matter, and like,
yes, they matter. Of course they matter.
I'm not even gonna cite it. Just like go Google this stuff. You can
just
find so many quotes.
It matters how you
quotes from the Bible about
exactly.
Just go do it.
You don't remember the 11th commandment?
What's that?
That's the one that says serial killers are okay if they have faith in God. That's number 11, according to Lauren.
That's the Lost Amendment, right?
Okay, this one is whack as whack can be. So, do you know Tim Pool apparently has coffee now? Because I don't know why, but this is Alex Stein is selling Tim Pool's coffee on his show, and he decided to sell it in a certain bizarre way.
Yo, it's prime time with Lord Trump. Don't act like a chump. I am a pimp on a blimp, and I'm eating that shrimp. Cash brew coffee makes you feel great. It will help you stay up late. Study for a test. Do your best when you drink cat brew in your cup. It will make you want to fuck. Yeah, I said that. What can I say? Cash brew coffee will make you straight and not gay. All right, guys, on Prime Time 99, pimp on a blimp.
Right. So, like, what do you think? Was that off the dome, or did he pre-write that?
I think he pre-wrote it. I think he actually put some effort into that shit.
It could be 50. It's 50-50 for me. I don't know. Could go
all right,
either
fair.
way. Okay, one thing that I have to bring up about this clip, it's less about the coffee because I'm sure it's garbage and I don't really care.
I'm sure.
But so Alex Stein's show, it takes place on a blimp, right? That's the setting for the show, because he always talks about how he's a pimp on a blimp eating shrimp, and the navigator for the ship is a computer, like an AI program that he bought from Amazon. That's like the bit on the show. But it has the voice of his deceased mother, who I believe passed away during COVID. And then he's simultaneously an anti-vax guy. So there's a lot going on there. Psychosocial stuff going on with this show.
Yeah.
And I just have to remind people of that very bizarre structure. That he's going around the world in this blimp with his dead robot mom, and someone needs to look into that, I think.
I agree. It's a little crazy. And then we're going to end with this one. This is the RNC chair, and he had a little bit of an oopsie.
Out. At the end of the day, this comes down to a very simple contrast between President Trump and President Biden. Were you better off 4 years ago than you are today? The answer for this entire country is no. I mean, yeah, we are better off today, or we will.
Oops. He might as well have just announced that he's supporting Biden.
Good job, buddy.
Good
job.
And he tries to catch himself. He's like, wait. Oh, shit. No, that was not what I was supposed to say.
I love it. It reminds me of when George W. Bush was giving a speech about, I think he was talking about Ukraine, and he like had a Freudian slip where, what did he say? Like we should have never invaded Iraq is like what he said, and then he that was incredible.
And you're like, right, George, you're right. We should have never invaded. Thank you so much for finally acknowledging that, bro.
I have to agree sometimes with the guy. You got to give it to him occasionally.
My favorite George Bush one was when he said he had put food on your family. I was like, wait, what? He had so many though. That guy always he never spoke clearly. I mean, ever.
But he spoke with such confidence that you sometimes you're like, yeah, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what the hell did I just... Anyway, all right. Cullen, do we have any super chats, questions, or anything to put up? We do. Tina with lots of fires. We love lots of fires. Fridays are the best. Don't tell Jordan. I agree. Fridays are the best. We have a lot of fun covering this stuff. We are educational. We talk about stuff that other people are just not talking about, and it's fun. We try to make it fun. Thank you so much for the $9.99. We appreciate that. Super generous. The Lumpen, I think. The Lumpen Lodge, $5. Thank you so much. Apparently, I have a KOS order from neo-Nazi groups and fascist militia, the same ones who burned down a friend's house. What? I told Jordan about this. We need to hear about this. Can you send
concerning.
That is concerning. So email the info@statuscoup.com account and it will reach me direct. I'd like to hear about this. Maybe we can help you too. Wow, that's scary. Yeah, some of these groups, they're capable of violence. So be careful. And also email me. Tony D. How are you, Tony D? $1.99. Thank you. Nazi Fight Club sounds Brad Pitt's next movie.
Yeah.
Truth. I could actually see this. Thank you, Tony D. We appreciate that. Oh, Chris Garrett, OG Chris Garrett. Thank you so much for the $5. We appreciate it. Thank you, Tina, for covering the news that will never be covered by the corporate media, industrial complex. You're welcome. People need to know about the deep racists. They do. They do. I agree, Chris. We do our best. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Dave L. Thank you, Dave L. $10. Wow, it's a good super chat day. See, they love you, Steve. 50% of boxing is knowing how not to get hit. Yes, they don't know that, though. The basics of jiu-jitsu are knowing how to stay safe on the ground. Every lefty should at least take some beginner's classes. I mean, yeah, the right's training. It would make sense. Although I worry about all the fights breaking out, more violence breaking out. I think, Steve, I don't know how you think about this, but I think that, 2024 going into 2025, what happens with this next election cycle, whether Trump wins or loses, I think we're going to have some violence. I think if he wins, he's going to obviously let all the J6ers out of jail. They're going to be more emboldened. If he loses, I don't think people are going to believe he lost because they still don't believe he lost 4 years ago. And, this isn't a majority of Americans, but I think it's enough to be disruptive.
Yeah. We're in the cool zone.
Yeah.
It's not.
Cullen.
It's not,
oh, sorry.
No.
Cullen, is that all of them or?
Yeah, that's all of them.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Steve, if people want to follow your work, where should they do that at? I know you're still using Twitter, but are you kind of morphing off of that? I'm trying to encourage people to get on BlueSky.
Yeah, I'm on BlueSky at Steve Anzetti, which is, I think should be under my name here if that's visible. I am still on Twitter, but I apparently may not be for very long.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. They keep trying to kick me off.
Wait, hang on, Steve. Didn't they suspend you? Elon suspended you last year for something, didn't he?
Yeah, I've been suspended 2 or 3 times since he bought the platform, and I somehow keep getting let back in the back door. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm on other places. You can follow me on BlueSky. That's probably the most most active place that I am.
Most viable. Yeah, most viable. And then also, before I go, please make sure, folks, that you check out my new piece in Unicorn Riot that came out Tuesday. It's a piece I've been working on for a long time, 3 years now, actually, total investigation work. But it was time to publish about a group of teenagers that have been exploiting other teenagers. And of course, now Washington Post, Wired, and everybody else has jumped on the bandwagon with their pieces of this. But if you want a really good deep dive with lots of information, please read mine. All right, everybody, have a fantastic weekend. It's Friday. Go out and enjoy yourselves. And we will be back on Monday. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.